October 14th, 1943. 26,000 feet above Schweinfurt, Germany. Major James Howard watches the FW190 roll inverted and dive, cannon fire stitching the air where his P-47 Thunderbolt was 3 seconds ago. His fighter, 8 tons of radial engine and armor plate, responds like a truck trying to dance. He hauls the stick back, feeling the controls go mushy as the big Pratt & Whitney engine gasps for oxygen in the thin air. The German fighter is already gone, accelerating away with contemptuous ease. Below him, the bomber stream is dying. B-17. Flying fortresses trail smoke and fire across 50 miles of German sky. Parachutes blossom like white flowers. A fort breaks formation, 2 engines feathered, and a swarm of Bf-109s descends on it like sharks. Howard counts 4, 5, 6 bombers going down, and there's nothing he can do about it, because his fuel gauge is tapping on empty. Mohawk leader, this is Mohawk 3. The voice in his headset is tight with frustration. Bingo fuel, we gotta turn back. Howard checks his own tanks. 15 minutes, maybe 20, if he leans the mixture to the edge of flame out. They've escorted the bombers 450 miles into Germany, farther than any fighter escort in history. And it's not nearly far enough. Schweinfurt is still 150 miles ahead. The ball-bearing factories the bombers are trying to destroy are still an hour away, and the Luftwaffe knows it. All Mohawk flights, this is leader. RTB on my mark. Howard's voice sounds hollow in his own ears. 3, 2, 1. Mark. The P-47s peel away, diving west toward England, their fuel tanks nearly dry. Behind them, 60 B-17s continue without fighter cover into the teeth of the German defensive belt. Howard knows what's going to happen. They all know. The math is brutally simple. Bombers without escorts are target practice. As he crosses back over the Belgian coast, Howard's radio crackles with fragmentary transmissions. Bomber pilots calling out attacks, gunners screaming warnings, squadron leaders trying to hold formations together as fighters tear them apart. By the time Howard lands at Debden Airfield 3 hours later, the casualty reports are already coming in. 60 bombers sent to Schweinfurt. 29 don't come back. Another 18 too damaged to fly again. Over 600 men dead, wounded, or missing in a single afternoon. The second Schweinfurt raid, Black Thursday they'll call it, has just proven what every airman in the 8th Air Force already suspected. Without long-range fighter escorts, daylight bombing of Germany is suicide. October 15th, 1943, 0900 hours. Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio. Colonel Benjamin Kelsey stands in the experimental hangar and stares at the rejected fighter. It's a P-51 Mustang, serial number 43-6006, parked between a P-38 Lightning and a row of engine test stands. Sleek lines, laminar flow wing. Allison V-17, 10 engine that produces 1,200 horsepower at sea level and substantially less than that at altitude. The Army Air Forces ordered 310 of them last year for low-level reconnaissance and ground attack. They're fast down low, maybe the fastest fighter below 15,000 feet. But above 20,000 feet, where the bombers operate and the real air war happens, the Allison-powered Mustang is a mediocrity. Kelsey has just spent 3 days reviewing after-action reports from Schweinfurt. The numbers are catastrophic. The strategic bombing campaign, the entire doctrine of using American industrial might to destroy German war production, is teetering on the edge of collapse. The bombers can't survive without escorts. The P-47s and P-38s can't escort them deep enough. And every fighter design in development, the P-63, the P-72, experimental jets, is at least a year away from operational deployment. 1 year. In 1 year, at current loss rates, the 8th Air Force will cease to exist as an effective fighting force. Colonel? Captain Robert Chilton, his engineering liaison, approaches with a folder. You asked for the British test reports on the Mustang variants. Kelsey takes the folder without looking away from the aircraft. Tell me something I don't know, Bob. RAF tested some Mustangs with Merlin engines, 61 series, 2-stage supercharger, called them Mustang X prototypes. Chilton pauses. The performance figures are, well, sir, you should probably just read them. Kelsey opens the folder. His eyes scan past the technical preamble to the flight test data, and he stops breathing. Maximum speed at 25,000 feet, 432 miles per hour. Service ceiling, 41,900 feet. Rate of climb, 3,475 feet per minute. Combat radius with drop tanks, estimated 750 miles. Kelsey reads the numbers again. Then a third time. Because if these figures are accurate, if they're even close to accurate, this aircraft doesn't just solve the escort problem, it rewrites the entire air war. When were these tests conducted? He asks quietly. April of '42, sir. A year and a half ago. The British have been trying to get our attention about it, but with production priorities and engine allocation disputes. Get me General Arnold on the phone. Kelsey's voice cuts through the explanation like a blade. Now, I don't care if he's in a meeting with Roosevelt himself. Get him on the phone and tell him we need a crash program authorization today, not tomorrow. Chilton hesitates. Sir, the production lines are already committed. Allison engines are American-made, switching to British Merlins, even license-built ones. The logistics alone. Bob. Kelsey turns to face him. Yesterday we lost 60 B-17s in 4 hours. At that rate, we lose the war by next summer. I don't care if we have to hand-build every Merlin in a tent in Nevada. We're making this work. He looks back at the Mustang, seeing it differently now. Not a rejected reconnaissance plane. A weapon that might, just might, turn the tide of the air war over Europe. But first, he needs to convince a lot of very skeptical generals that an American fighter with a British engine is the answer to a problem that's killing 600 men at a time. And he needs to do it fast. October 18th, 1943. 14:30 hours. North American Aviation, Inglewood, California. Edgar Schmued doesn't look up when the telegram arrives. He's hunched over a drafting table in the engineering section, surrounded by blueprints, stress calculation sheets, and half-empty coffee cups. At 43 years old, Schmued is North American Aviation's chief designer, a German-born engineer who fled the Nazi regime in 1930 and brought with him an obsessive understanding of aerodynamics that borders on the mystical. The other engineers joke that he dreams in airflow patterns. Right now, he's redesigning the P-51's engine cooling system for the 3rd time this week. Mr. Schmued. His assistant, Raymond Rice, places the telegram on the only clear spot on the desk. From right field, marked urgent, Schmued sets down his slide rule and reads. His expression doesn't change, but Rice notices his boss's hands tighten slightly on the paper. The telegram is from Colonel Kelsey. 3 paragraphs of military brevity that translate to, the Army wants Merlin-powered Mustangs. They want them in quantity. They want them in 6 months. Can you do it? Schmued reads it twice, then looks at the blueprint in front of him. A cross-section of the P-51A's nose, showing the Allison engine installation with its glycol coolant system, oil coolers, and intake ducting. Switching to the Rolls-Royce Merlin means changing everything forward of the cockpit. Different engine mounts, different propeller, different cooling requirements because the Merlin runs hotter, different weight distribution affecting the entire airframe's center of gravity. 6 months. Mr. Rice, Schmued says calmly, please assemble the senior design team. Conference room, 20 minutes. All of them, sir? All of them. After Rice leaves, Schmued stands and walks to the window overlooking the production floor. Below him, workers are assembling P-51As, the Allison version, at the rate of 16 aircraft per day. The production line is a ballet of precision, every station calibrated, every worker trained, every tool and jig and fixture optimized for this specific configuration, and Kelsey wants him to change it, completely, while maintaining production. In 6 months, Schmued smiles, because he's been thinking about this problem for over a year. October 18th, 1943. 1500 hours. North American Aviation Conference Room. 10 men sit around the table when Schmued enters. These are the best aeronautical engineers in America, the team that designed the P-51 in just 117 days back in 1940, a feat that still seems impossible even to the men who accomplished it. Ed Horkey, chief aerodynamicist, Larry Waite, propulsion specialist, Raymond Hess, structures engineer, all of them looking tired because they've been working 70-hour weeks for 3 years. Schmued doesn't sit. He pins the telegram to the wall and begins talking. The British put a Merlin 61 in one of our aircraft. 2-stage supercharger, intercooler, 1,520 horsepower at 20,000 feet. The performance is exceptional. The Army Air Forces now wants this configuration in production quantities. Target, June 1944. Ed Horkey whistles softly. That's 8 months. 7, Schmued corrects. We lose 1 month to procurement and tooling lag. Silence around the table. Then Larry Waite speaks up. Edgar, the Merlin is 6 inches longer than the Allison. Different mounting points. The whole nose section. I know. Schmued pulls out a rolled blueprint, one he's been working on privately for months, and spreads it across the table. This is the modification scheme. The engineers lean forward. What they're looking at is a complete redesign of the P-51's forward fuselage. New engine bearers, relocated oil cooler, modified radiator scoop under the wing, different propeller hub to handle the Merlin's higher torque. And threading through it all, Schmued's signature obsession, maintaining the laminar flow characteristics that make the Mustang so fast. The Merlin produces more heat than the Allison, Schmued continues, but it also produces 30% more power at altitude. The challenge is cooling without increasing drag. I've calculated that we can use the Meredith effect, heating the radiator air and expelling it as thrust, to actually reduce the net drag penalty. Raymond Hess is shaking his head. Edgar, this is beautiful work, but 7 months? We'll need new jigs, new tooling, worker retraining, test flights, qualification trials, which is why we begin today. Schmued's voice is quiet but absolute. We split the team. Half continues Allison production. Half begins Merlin conversion. We build the first prototype in-house using airframe NA-101. We hand-fit every component if necessary. Once we prove the concept, we parallelize the engineering for production. Ed Horkey leans back in his chair. You've already thought this through. I've been thinking about it since the British sent us their test data 18 months ago. Schmued taps the blueprint. The Mustang was always designed to be the best possible airframe. We gave it the best American engine available in 1940, but engines evolve faster than airframes. The Merlin is simply better, and our aircraft deserves the best engine, not just an adequate one. The Army's going to want guarantees, Waite says. Performance specs, delivery schedules, penalties if we miss targets. Then we don't miss targets. Schmued looks around the table, meeting each man's eyes. Gentlemen, our bombers are being slaughtered over Germany because they lack adequate fighter escort. Yesterday at Schweinfurt, 29 B-17s were shot down in a single raid. Each bomber carried 10 men. That's 290 dead Americans because our fighters cannot fly far enough or fight well enough at altitude. He pauses, letting the weight of those numbers settle. The aircraft on this blueprint can fly to Berlin and back. It can fight the Bf-109 and FW-190 at any altitude and win. It can turn the air war from an attrition nightmare into a campaign we can win. Schmued's voice drops. But only if we build it. Only if we build it right, and only if we build it now. The room is silent. Then Raymond Hess picks up a pencil. Okay, he says. Where do we start? Schmued smiles, a rare expression on his normally serious face. We start with the engine mounts. Larry, I need you to contact Packard. They're building Merlins under license. We need detailed mounting specifications and a test engine shipped here within 2 weeks. The meeting runs for 3 hours. By the time it ends, every engineer has assignments, deadlines, and a shared understanding that they're about to attempt something that violates every principle of cautious aerospace development. They're going to redesign a fighter aircraft while it's in mass production, swap its entire propulsion system, and have it combat-ready in 7 months. And if Edgar Schmued's calculations are correct, if his obsessive attention to airflow and cooling and structural efficiency pays off the way he believes it will, they're going to create the finest fighter aircraft of World War II. But first, they have to prove it works. November 30th, 1943. 0645 hours. North American Aviation Flight Test Facility, Inglewood. Test pilot Bob Chilton, no relation to the Captain Chilton at Wright Field, walks across the tarmac towards something that looks familiar and alien at the same time. It's a P-51, serial number 41-37352, but the nose is wrong. Longer. The propeller blades are broader, 4 instead of 3. The air intake under the nose has been repositioned. And when the mechanics fired up the engine 20 minutes ago, the sound was different. Deeper, more aggressive, a mechanical snarl that echoed across the airfield like thunder. Edgar Schmued stands beside the aircraft with a clipboard, his tie loosened, sleeves rolled up. He hasn't slept in 36 hours. None of them have. The prototype, internally designated NA-73X Merlin conversion, was assembled in 42 days of round-the-clock work. Hand-fitted components, improvised solutions, engineering decisions made at 3 a.m. with coffee and slide rules. Now it has to fly. Morning, Edgar. Chilton taps the cowling. She looks meaner. She weighs 230 pounds more than the Allison version, Schmued replies, consulting his notes. The Merlin and its accessories add weight. We compensated by moving the radio equipment aft, but the center of gravity is still 3 inches forward of optimal. Will she fly? The calculations say yes. Schmued looks up. But calculations are theory. You will give us data. Chilton grins. It's the closest thing to a joke he's heard from Schmued in 3 years. He pulls on his leather flight helmet, checks the throat mic connection, and climbs the wing to the cockpit. The crew chief helps him strap in. Shoulder harness, lap belt, parachute connections. Through the windscreen, Chilton can see a small crowd gathering near the hangar. Engineers, managers, even J.H. Dutch Kindleberger, North American's president, has come out to watch. Everyone knows what's riding on this flight. Chilton runs through the pre-flight checklist. Fuel, full internal tanks. No drop tanks for this first flight. Coolant temperature, nominal. Oil pressure, good. He primes the Packard-built Merlin 16503 engine, an American-made copy of the Rolls-Royce Merlin 61, and hits the starter. The engine catches with a roar that vibrates through the entire airframe. 12 cylinders. 2-stage, 2-speed supercharger. 1,520 horsepower at 20,000 feet. The propeller blades blur into an invisible disc, and Chilton feels the aircraft strain against the wheel chocks like a hunting dog on a leash. He checks the gauges one more time. Everything green. He keys his radio. Tower, this is NA-73X test bird. Request clearance for takeoff and initial climb to 30,000 feet. NA-73X, you're cleared. Winds 240 at 8 knots. Good luck, Bob. Chilton releases the brakes. The Mustang leaps forward. Not the gradual acceleration of the Allison version. This is violent. The engine's torque tries to pull the aircraft left, and Chilton corrects with rudder, feeling the tail come up after just 200 feet of rollout. At 90 miles per hour, the stick goes light in his hands. At 110, the wheels leave the runway, and the Mustang claws into the morning sky with a rate of climb that makes Chilton laugh out loud. Tower, I'm seeing 3,600 feet per minute on initial climb. Repeat, 3,600. On the ground, Edgar Schmued writes the number down and allows himself a small smile. Chilton levels off at 5,000 feet and runs through basic handling tests. Stalls, clean and controlled. Rolls, crisp and responsive despite the forward CG. Turns, he pulls 4 Gs and the airframe doesn't even shudder. The aircraft flies like the Allison version, but tighter, more responsive, as if the extra power has awakened something predatory in its design. Climbing to altitude, Chilton reports. Let's see what she does upstairs. He points the nose up and opens the throttle. The Merlin's supercharger kicks in at 14,000 feet with a subtle change in engine note, and the rate of climb barely decreases. At 20,000 feet, where the Allison-powered Mustang starts gasping, this aircraft is still accelerating. At 25,000 feet, Chilton levels off and checks his airspeed. 415 miles per hour. True airspeed closer to 440. Edgar, are you getting these numbers? Confirmed. Schmued's voice is calm, but there's an undercurrent of satisfaction. Continue to 30,000 feet. We need the full envelope data. Chilton climbs. At 30,000 feet, the air is thin enough that he can see the curvature of the Earth. The Pacific Ocean stretches blue and endless to the west. The Mustang is still flying smoothly, controls still responsive, engine still purring with mechanical perfection. He runs a series of speed tests. Level flight, 425 miles per hour indicated. Shallow dive, 480 miles per hour, and the airframe is rock steady. He tries combat maneuvers, snap rolls, barrel rolls, high G turns, and the aircraft responds like it's reading his mind. Whatever weight penalty the Merlin added, the power more than compensates. After 40 minutes of testing, Chilton descends and lines up for landing. The Mustang touches down smoothly, and he taxis back to the crowd waiting near the hangar. When he shuts down the engine and climbs out, Edgar Schmued is the first person there. Well? Schmued asks. Chilton pulls off his helmet. His hair is matted with sweat, his face flushed. Edgar, this isn't a fighter. It's a goddamn missile with wings. December 15th, 1943. 1,000 hours. Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio. Colonel Benjamin Kelsey watches the same aircraft, now officially designated XP-51B, complete a maximum performance climb that makes his P-47 Thunderbolt look like a cargo plane. North American flew the prototype to Ohio for Army Air Force's evaluation trials. For 2 weeks, military test pilots have been wringing it out. Speed tests, climb tests, dive tests, gunnery trials, range calculations. Every number confirms what Kelsey suspected from the British data. This aircraft is a revolution. Major Thomas Hayes, chief of fighter testing, approaches with a stack of reports. Final numbers are in, sir. Kelsey takes the folder. Inside are pages of data reduced to cold mathematics. Maximum speed, 441 miles per hour at 29,800 feet service ceiling, 42,000 feet rate of climb, 3,475 feet per minute range, internal fuel. 950 miles range with two 75-gallon drop tanks, 1,650 miles combat radius, 750-plus miles. That last number is the one that matters, 750 miles. Berlin is 580 miles from the English coast. With this aircraft, American fighters can escort bombers all the way to the German capital and back, something currently impossible with any fighter in existence. What about combat performance against German fighters? Kelsey asks. We ran simulated dogfights against our P-47s and P-38s. Hayes flips to another page. At altitude, the XP-51B outturns the Thunderbolt and outclimbs the Lightning. Below 15,000 feet, it's the fastest thing we've got. The pilots are calling it unfair. Kelsey closes the folder. Production timeline? North American says they can begin P-51B deliveries in March 44. Full-rate production by May. They're converting the California plant and bringing a new facility online in Dallas. Combined output, 400 aircraft per month by summer. 400 per month. By this time next year, that's nearly 5,000 Merlin-powered Mustangs. Enough to escort every bomber mission into Germany. Enough to achieve air superiority over the Third Reich. Enough to change the war. Get me General Arnold, Kelsey says. Tell him we need an immediate production authorization. Every P-51 rolling off the line gets a Merlin engine. No exceptions. And tell North American to start hiring, because we're doubling their production quotas. Hayes salutes and leaves. Kelsey walks out to the flight line where the XP-51B sits, engine cooling, propeller still. He thinks about Edgar Schmued, the German engineer who fled the Nazis and ended up designing the weapon that will help defeat them. He thinks about the British engineers at Rolls-Royce who developed the Merlin engine and freely shared the technology. He thinks about American industrial capacity, ready to build this aircraft in quantities that will blacken the German sky. Most of all, he thinks about the bomber crews, the ones who died at Schweinfurt, the ones still flying missions without adequate escorts, the ones who will now have a fighter that can protect them all the way to the target and back, a fighter that's nearly invincible. March 6th, 1944, 07:15 hours, RAF Debden, Essex, England. Captain Dawn Gentle stands on the rain-soaked tarmac and falls in love. She's brand new, fresh from the factory, still smelling of paint and hydraulic fluid. P-51, B5NA, serial number 43-6819, with Shangri-La stenciled on her nose in white letters. The 4th Fighter Group received their first Merlin Mustangs 3 days ago. 24 aircraft to replace their war-weary P-47 Thunderbolts. The pilots gathered around them like children at Christmas, running hands along the sleek fuselage, marveling at the laminar flow wings, arguing over who would fly which aircraft. Gentle drew Shangri-La. Lucky number 19. She's a beauty, Captain. His crew chief, Staff Sergeant Joe Higgins, pats the cowling affectionately. Flew her yesterday. Smoothest engine I've ever heard. The Merlin purrs like a kitten. A very angry, very fast kitten. Gentile grins. He's already 21 kills to his credit, most in P-47s. But the Thunderbolt is a brawler. Tough, reliable, capable of taking punishment and bringing you home. The Mustang is something different. Something surgical. At the briefing an hour ago, Colonel Don Blakesley, their commanding officer, put it simply. Gentlemen, we've been given a scalpel. Let's see if we can cut out the Luftwaffe's heart. Today's mission: escort B-17s to Berlin. Berlin. The word alone makes the bomber crews nervous. 580 miles into Germany. 6 hours in the air. Every fighter base between England and the target will scramble interceptors. Every flak battery will open fire. And until now, no American fighter could make the round trip with enough fuel to engage in combat. Until now. Gentile climbs into Shangri-La's cockpit and runs through his checklist with the ritual precision of a man who's done this 107 times before. Oxygen. Connected. Guns, 8. 50 caliber Brownings, 1,880 rounds. Fuel. Full internal tanks plus 2 75-gallon drop tanks under the wings. He does the math. 6 hours endurance, maybe 7 if he's conservative. More than enough. The Merlin catches on the first try, settling into that distinctive growl that's already becoming familiar. Around him, 23 other Mustangs are starting up, propellers spinning into invisible discs. At 0745, Blakesley's voice crackles over the radio. "Horseback squadron, form up. Let's go to work." They take off in pairs, climbing into an overcast sky that's clearing to the east. At 10,000 feet, they break through the clouds into brilliant sunshine. At 25,000 feet, they level off and head southeast, throttled back to cruise settings that sip fuel at a miserly 28 gallons per hour. Gentile has never felt so far from home and so confident at the same time. March 6th, 1944. 10:35 hours. 27,000 feet above Brunswick, Germany. The bomber stream stretches for 40 miles. 658 B-17 flying fortresses in tight combat boxes, their contrails writing white lines across the German sky. Gentile's flight is positioned high and to the right, weaving gentle S-turns to match the bomber's slower speed. His eyes constantly scan. 12 o'clock high, 3 o'clock level, 6 o'clock low. Looking for the glint of sunlight on canopy, the dark specks that resolve into enemy fighters. Horseback leader, this is Horseback Blue 3. Bogies, 2 o'clock high. Make it 12 plus. Gentile snaps his head right. There, climbing out of the haze, a formation of Bf-109Gs, the Luftwaffe's latest model. They're angling to intercept the bombers from the sun, a classic attack profile. In a P-47, Gentile would have to decide: break formation to intercept, or stay with the bombers and hope the Germans don't press their attack. The Thunderbolt's climb rate couldn't do both. The Mustang can. Horseback flight, drop tanks now. Blue and red sections, you're with me. Green and white, stay with the heavies. Gentile punches the tank release. The 2 75-gallon tanks tumble away, and Shangri-La immediately feels lighter, more eager. He pushes the throttle to war emergency power, 61 inches of manifold pressure, 3,000 RPM, and the Merlin's supercharger screams. The Mustang leaps upward, climbing at 3,000 feet per minute toward the Germans who haven't yet seen them. At 29,000 feet, the 109s finally notice. They scatter, 4 breaking left, 8 continuing toward the bombers. Gentile picks the nearest one and closes to 400 yards. The German pilot sees him coming and brakes hard right, pulling 7 Gs in a desperate evasion turn. The Mustang follows him effortlessly. Gentile learned to dogfight in P-47s, where you don't outturn the enemy. You use energy and altitude to dictate the engagement. But Shangri-La turns like she's mounted on rails. The 109 tightens his turn, trying to get inside Gentile's radius. Gentile matches him, pulling the stick back smoothly, feeling 4 Gs press him into his seat. The gunsight pipper tracks across the German's tail, leading him by 2 aircraft lengths. Gentile squeezes the trigger. 8.50 caliber machine guns roar, and the 109's left wing explodes in a shower of aluminum and fabric. The German fighter snap rolls violently, trailing smoke, and drops into a spin. Gentile doesn't watch him fall. He's already scanning for the next target. Horseback Blue 2, you got one on your 6. Gentile looks left and sees Lieutenant Goody Goodson with a 109 glued to his tail, cannon flashing. Gentile banks hard, diving to pick up speed, then pulls up behind the German in a high-angle deflection shot, that would be nearly impossible in a heavier fighter. The Pipper leads the 109x4 aircraft lengths. Gentile fires a 2-second burst. Hits sparkle across the 109's canopy and engine. The aircraft shudders, rolls inverted, and the pilot bails out, his parachute deploying at 24,000 feet. The entire engagement has lasted 90 seconds. Clear, Blue 2. Check your 6. Thanks, boss. I owe you one. The remaining 109s are breaking off, diving away from the bomber stream. The Mustangs don't pursue. Their job is escort, not glory hunting. Gentile checks his fuel. Still 140 gallons remaining. Plenty to reach Berlin and make it home. He looks down at the bomber formation, still intact, still pressing toward the target. Not a single B-17 lost to the fighters that just attacked. Because for the first time in this war, American escort fighters were where they needed to be, with the performance to dominate the engagement. Horseback flight. Resume escort position. The heavies are counting on us. They climb back to 27,000 feet and rejoin the formation. Berlin is still 180 miles ahead. The Luftwaffe will try again. They always do. But now, they're facing an opponent they've never encountered before. An American fighter that can outclimb them, outturn them, and outrange them all the way to Hitler's doorstep. March 6th, 1944. 15:20 hours. Over the North Sea, homebound. Gentile crosses the English coast with 80 gallons of fuel remaining and 2 more kills to his credit. The mission lasted 6 hours and 10 minutes. The longest fighter escort in history. Of the 658 bombers that attacked Berlin, 632 returned. 26 losses. Painful, but nothing like Schweinfurt. And the bomber crews are reporting something new in their debriefs. Confidence. Because they weren't alone anymore. As Gentile lines up for landing at Debden, he thinks about Edgar Schmued and the engineers who built this aircraft. He thinks about the British designers who shared the Merlin engine. He thinks about the factory workers in California and Texas who are building 400 Mustangs every month. Most of all, he thinks about tomorrow's mission. And the day after. And all the missions to come. Because the P-51 Mustang has just proven it can take the fight to Germany. And the Luftwaffe has no answer for it. May 8th, 1944. 11:45 hours. Luftwaffe Fighter Command Headquarters, Berlin-Wannsee. General Major Adolf Galland stares at the loss reports and feels the war slipping through his fingers. He's the youngest general in the Luftwaffe, a fighter ace with 104 confirmed kills, and the man responsible for defending the Reich against the American daylight bombing campaign. The papers on his desk tell a story he doesn't want to believe. In April alone, the Luftwaffe lost 489 fighters in combat over Germany. Pilots killed or missing, 367. Replacement aircraft arriving, 220. Replacement pilots completing training, 175. The mathematics of attrition are irrefutable. The Luftwaffe is bleeding to death. The Americans have changed tactics, Oberst Johannes Steinhoff says from across the desk. He's a veteran fighter leader, 38 kills, and his face shows the strain of 3 months fighting the new American escorts. The Mustangs are no longer staying close to the bombers. They're ranging ahead, hunting our formations before we can even reach the bomber stream. Galland lights a cigar, his trademark, along with the Mickey Mouse insignia painted on his aircraft, and leans back. Describe the P-51's performance characteristics, precisely. Steinhoff consults his notes. Maximum speed, 710 kilometers per hour at 8,000 meters. Better than our 109G by 30 kilometers per hour. Service ceiling, 12,800 meters. Better than ours by 400 meters. Range. They're escorting bombers to Munich, to Vienna, to anywhere in the Reich. Our pilots report engagements over targets and still seeing the same Mustangs on the return flight. Maneuverability? Equal or superior to the FW-190 in turns. Superior to the 109 at all altitudes. Steinhoff pauses. Our pilots are calling it Der Würger, the Strangler, because once it gets behind you, you cannot escape. Galland blows smoke toward the ceiling. He's flown against American fighters, P-47s and P-38s, and knows their strengths and weaknesses. The Thunderbolt is tough but heavy. The Lightning is fast but complex. Both can be defeated by experienced pilots using proper tactics. But the Mustang is different. It has no significant weaknesses. Fast, maneuverable, long-ranged, well-armed, and, worst of all, arriving in overwhelming numbers. Intelligence reports indicate American factories are producing 500 per month now, with production accelerating. By summer, the 8th Air Force will field over 1,000 P-51s. Against that flood, Galland has perhaps 800 serviceable fighters defending all of Germany, many flown by replacement pilots with less than 50 hours in type. "What are our pilots saying?" Galland asks quietly. Steinhoff hesitates. Some of the younger ones believe the Mustang is invincible, that it cannot be beaten. And the veterans? They know it can be beaten, by better pilots with tactical advantages. But those opportunities are becoming rare. The Americans are learning. They fly in loose formations now, 4-ship shawarma like our own tactics. They position themselves higher. They attack from the sun. And there are so many of them that even when we achieve local superiority, more appear within minutes. Galland stubs out his cigar. Recommendations? We need the new fighters. The Me-262 jet. The Do-335. The Ta-152. Aircraft with performance advantages that offset their numbers. The Führer has ordered the 262 converted to a bomber. It won't be available as a fighter until late this year at earliest. Galland's voice carries bitter frustration. The others are months from production. In the meantime, we fight with what we have. Then we're fighting a losing battle, sir. The words hang in the air. Both men know they're true. The Luftwaffe can still win individual engagements, still shoot down bombers, still bloody the Americans. But the strategic calculus has shifted. The P-51 has given the Americans something the Luftwaffe cannot counter: the ability to conduct daylight bombing operations anywhere in Europe with acceptable losses. And acceptable losses means the campaign continues, day after day, week after week. German factories destroyed, oil refineries burning, ball-bearing plants smashed, transportation networks paralyzed, all protected by silver Mustangs that range across German skies like a plague. We continue fighting, Galland says finally. We make them pay for every kilometer. We develop new tactics. We train our pilots better. We prioritize the bombers. Killing B-17s is more valuable than killing Mustangs. And when the invasion comes, Steinhoff asks, when they need every fighter to oppose the landings? Galland doesn't answer, because they both know. When the invasion comes, and it's coming soon, everyone can feel it. The Luftwaffe will have to choose between defending the Reich from bombers and defending France from invasion. There aren't enough fighters for both missions. There aren't enough pilots. There aren't enough of anything except American aircraft filling the sky. After Steinhoff leaves, Galland walks to the window and looks out over Berlin. The city shows scars from recent raids: collapsed buildings, burned-out blocks, rubble-choked streets. The bombers did that. The Mustangs made it possible. He thinks about Edgar Schmued, whose name appears in intelligence reports as the Mustang's chief designer, a German engineer working for the Americans, building weapons to destroy the country he was born in. Galen wonders if Schmued lies awake at night thinking about the Luftwaffe pilots his aircraft has killed. Probably not. War doesn't allow for such sentimentality. Galen returns to his desk and begins drafting a tactical directive for fighter groups. New intercept patterns, fuel conservation techniques, priority targeting protocols, small adjustments that might save a few pilots, might shoot down a few more bombers, but nothing that changes the fundamental equation. The P-51 Mustang has achieved air superiority over Germany, and once you lose the sky, you lose the war. August 15, 1944, 14:30 hours, over Stuttgart, Germany. Major George Preddy banks his P-51D, Krieps A Mighty, into a gentle turn and watches the bomber stream past beneath him at 24,000 feet. His flight of 4 Mustangs weaves overhead, eyes scanning constantly. Below and behind, another 40 P-51s provide layered escort. And further back, another group is already engaging Luftwaffe interceptors that tried and failed to reach the bombers. Preddy has 23 kills now, all in Mustangs. The aircraft has become an extension of his body, responding to thought as much as control input. The P-51D model he's flying is even better than the B and C versions. Bubble canopy for 360-degree visibility, 6.50 caliber guns instead of 4, improved fuel system, better handling. Nearly invincible, just like the engineers promised. Falcon leader, this is Falcon 3. Single bogey, 5 o'clock low. Looks like he's alone? Preddy looks back and down. A single BF-109, probably a young pilot separated from his formation, trying to sneak up on the bombers from below. Preddy considers letting him go. The kid's going to die today anyway. Maybe not here, maybe on his next mission, but soon. The Luftwaffe is throwing pilots into combat with barely enough training to take off and land. But those bombers below carry 10 men each, and each bomber represents hundreds of hours of American labor, thousands of pounds of aluminum and steel, countless man-hours of engineering and manufacturing. Preddy rolls inverted and pulls the nose down. The 109 sees him coming and brakes hard left, jinking desperately. But there's no escape. Preddy closes to 300 yards, leads the turn by 3 aircraft lengths, and fires a 1-second burst. The 109's engine explodes in a gout of smoke and flame. The canopy blows off and the pilot tumbles out, parachute deploying. Preddy climbs back to altitude. The whole engagement took 30 seconds. Good kill, boss. Just another day at the office, 3. But it's more than that, and Preddy knows it. Every mission now, the Luftwaffe seems weaker, less organized, less effective. The veterans are dead or exhausted. The replacements are cannon fodder. The new jets and superprops they keep hearing about never appear in sufficient numbers to matter. The P-51 didn't just give the Allies a technical advantage, it gave them strategic dominance, air superiority, the ability to operate anywhere, anytime, with impunity. And that's more valuable than all the speed records and kill counts combined. September 17, 1944. North American Aviation, Inglewood, California. Edgar Schmued stands on the production floor and watches Mustang number 10,000 roll off the assembly line. It's a P-51D, finished in bare metal that gleams under the factory lights. Workers have signed their names on the fuselage, a tradition for milestone aircraft. Somewhere in that crowd of signatures is Schmued's own, written small and neat. E. Schmued, Chief Designer. 10,000 aircraft, in less than 2 years since the first Merlin-powered prototype flew. Production has peaked at 550 per month now, with no signs of slowing. The Dallas plant is running 3 shifts. The Inglewood facility operates around the clock. And still the Army Air Forces wants more. Raymond Rice appears at Schmued's elbow. They're asking about the P-51H higher performance version. Lightweight structure, more powerful engine. We'll have prototypes flying by spring, Schmued says. But the war will be over before it reaches production. You think so? Schmued looks at the aircraft in front of him, the 10,000th Mustang, soon to join thousands of others filling the skies over Europe and the Pacific. He thinks about the mission reports that cross his desk, the kill ratios, the bomber loss rates dropping month after month, the photographs of German cities reduced to rubble, their destruction made possible by the escorts his aircraft provides. Yes, he says quietly, the war will be over. Because we gave them the tool to win it. He doesn't mention the cost. The German pilots killed by his design, the cities destroyed because his aircraft enabled the bombing campaign, the thousands of deaths directly traceable to the aircraft he created. Schmued fled Germany to escape tyranny. He helped defeat it by building the weapon that made victory inevitable. History will call the P-51 Mustang one of the finest fighter aircraft ever built, nearly invincible in combat. A war-winning design. Edgar Schmued just calls it necessary.